Morning, everyone. It's been another productive week here in the People's House. Passed common sense legislation to protect American families and job creators from EPA rules that will drive up their electricity bills. Passed a measure to repeal Obamacare's unelected, unaccountable board of bureaucrats and protected seniors' access to health care. And yesterday we sent to the President's desk a bill that will lead to more jobs and more opportunities for American workers. We're just about at the halfway point for this year, and we can point to some real progress on the people's priorities. But we've got a lot more work to do. That includes the first real entitlement reform in nearly 2 decades, first 10-year balanced budget plan since 2001, and real strides on veterans' health and human trafficking. As I said, our work is far from finished, but we're making real progress and getting things done for America's workers, families, and small businesses. On Iran, Tuesday marks the White House's own deadline for a final nuclear agreement. And after 2 years of talks and multiple extensions, French, Russian, and British negotiators have expressed concern that the negotiations are stalling. Of course, that's not for a lack of effort on the part of the Obama administration. Despite getting virtually nothing in return, the president has handed Iran concession after concession. He looked the other way, even as the Iranian regime built up its stockpile of nuclear material, stoked violence in Yemen, and tortured Americans that they hold hostage. And now the administration says, well, we may need a little more time. Giving Iran more flexibility will not lead to a good deal. It will only lead to more concessions for a regime that has no intention of giving up its desire for a nuclear weapon. I've said before, a bad deal is worse than no deal at all. Lastly, the Deputy Veterans Administration Secretary is on Capitol Hill today to discuss a nearly $3 billion shortfall in the agency's budget. Now, his message to Congress and the American people is, and I'll quote, get your checkbooks out. So let's review what's gone on over there. We've given the VA the authority to fire bureaucrats. They fire practically no one. We gave the VA the resources to build hospitals, and they can't get any of them built on time. We gave the VA the resources to improve their care, and the waiting lists are even longer. And the VA's problem isn't funding, it's outright failure. Absolute failure to take care of our veterans. And maybe the VA wouldn't jump from crisis to crisis if it actually had a long-term plan to clean up this mess. We're going to continue to do our part, but only the president can change the culture at the VA.
With today's SCOTUS ruling, you guys are faced with a choice of whether to go ahead and use reconciliation to try and repeal the ACA. One, do you still intend to do that? And B, are you confident that the score of any such plan will not increase the uninsured or...
Well, there's been no decision about how to deal with or what to use reconciliation for. The problem with Obamacare is still fundamentally the same. The law is broken. It's raising costs for American families. It's raising costs for small businesses. And it's just fundamentally broken. And we're going to continue our efforts to do everything we can to put the American people back in charge of their own health care and not the federal government.
Mr. Speaker, in 2013, in the year 2013, 34,000 Americans died by gunshot wound, about half of those violent. Yesterday, Republicans on the Appropriations Committee sent to the floor a bill that maintains a provision that essentially blocks the Centers for Disease Control from studying guns as a health issue. Given the violence that Americans are seeing on their televisions and given the 34,000 Americans who died in 2013 of gunshots, is that an appropriate policy to maintain at the CDC?
Listen, the CDC is there to look at diseases that need to be dealt with to protect the public health. I'm sorry, but a gun is not a disease. And guns don't kill people, people do. And when people use weapons in in a horrible way, we should condemn the actions of the individual and not blame the action on some weapon. Listen, there are hundreds of millions of weapons in America. They're there, and they're going to be there. They're protected under the Second Amendment. But people who use weapons in an inappropriate or illegal way ought to be dealt with severely.
You said that no decision has been made on what to do with the reconciliation language. Chairman Price, Chairman Enzi seem to think that that language is going to be used for health care. How broadly do you think the Republican response should be to the Supreme Court's decision? Should you be trying to get something that the president will sign, or should you be trying to get something that he won't sign?
We haven't made any decisions. Now, there was a lot of talk about using reconciliation to deal with Obamacare, and I'm sure there probably still is. But my point was, there's been no decision made as to how to proceed on that.
Congressman Buck, it seems that you and your caucus seem to go through this every 2 months, that they're saying that punishments are being doled out for not following certain conference initiatives. Whether it's not Congressman Buck, it'll be, say, Congressman Nugent or Congressman Webster. How effective is it by removing these members from their committees or chairmanships for you as far as unity is concerned within the conference?
You know, like any family, we have little squabbles from time to time, and we're in the middle of one as we speak, and I'm confident that we'll resolve our differences and move on.
Mr. Speaker?
Yep.
Did you expect something different when John Roberts was confirmed to the Supreme Court? Are you disappointed in how his tenure has turned out, particularly with regard to Obamacare?
I'll let the legal beagles around the country debate the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. I'm just a mere Speaker of the House.
There was a push, as you recall, by members of your caucus to try to change the health care law by attaching it to a spending bill. We know what happened there. You say
Sure
that
do.
that will not be an attempt again this year. Would you?
You're asking me?
Decide.
Listen, Obamacare is fundamentally broken. It's raising costs for people. It's pushing people out of the ability to afford health insurance, and it needs to be dealt with. But as we know, it's very difficult to deal with it when you have a president that fundamentally disagrees with us, and so the struggle will continue. Yes.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. I just was wondering how you feel about the Ex-Im Bank expiring. Was that something you were expecting to happen on your watch? Well,
you know, we've been expecting that it's going to get attached to something over in the Senate and come over to the House, and when it does, we'll deal with it. Until then, we won't.
Mr. Speaker, there was some discussion on the House floor just a few minutes ago that Mr. Meadows could be reinstated as subcommittee chairman on oversight. Do you have any information on that? Can you confirm that information?
No, I think you have to talk to Mr. Chaffetz.
Speaker Boehner, you said no decisions made on Obamacare yet, but will you commit to the House having some kind of vote this year on a Republican alternative to the law?
I'm not sure that, we'll see. There's been discussion about that, but most of the discussion so far this year was if the court ruled against the administration in King versus Burwell, what the response would be. And so that's where most of the conversation has been thus far this year.
But you have a whole task force of committee chairmen that were also directed at a replacement bill. What's going on with that?
They've been mostly focused on King versus Burwell, which we know how that turned out, so now it's time to refocus our efforts.
You have a lawsuit of your own pending against the Treasury and DHS, or sorry, HHS. Does this change anything with regard to that lawsuit, and if not, what's the status
Well,
of it?
it changes nothing with regard to the lawsuit that we filed against the administration over their source of payments to insurers with regard to Obamacare. They're paying insurers out of an account that's never been appropriated. And they've taken money from elsewhere in the law to do this. I think it violates the Constitution. It certainly violates Congress's prerogative to appropriate funds. So that case there was a statement of facts that we were trying to agree to with the administration, unable to. So we submitted our statement of facts. The administration submitted theirs, and at some point here soon, we're going to have to respond to their statement. They'll have to respond to ours, and the judge will make a ruling.
Mr. Speaker, you talked about the task force and the Republican conference preparing for what would have happened if King versus Burwell hadn't gone your way. Were House Republicans prepared to move forward today with a plan, with a proposal to come to the House floor if this had gone in another direction?
Yes, certainly. Certainly we're prepared, and frankly proud of the work that was done on a bicameral basis by the 5 chairmen who were principally involved in the House and Senate, and frankly the leaders in the House and Senate who worked to bring all of these parties together to have a unified response. Now it's not necessary. Yes.
I know that you mentioned your thoughts about the Iran deal earlier, but I'm just curious, what do you make of the fact that 5 senior national security advisors to President Obama have signed a joint letter voicing serious doubts about the Iran negotiation?
Good for them. Listen, this is, we're about to get stuck with a bad deal, with a bad regime. This is not good for America, and it's certainly not good for our allies around the world.